It wasn't supposed to end like this. Walter Harris arrived before dawn, as he had for nearly 30 years. Same dark blue jacket, same thermos of black coffee, same slow, steady limp from a leg that once ran through gunfire. His keyring jingled softly as he unlocked the main lobby doors. The building breathed cold morning air as he stepped inside. By 7 a.m., the suits would flood in. Law firms, tech startups, real estate brokers. None of them knew the building's history. None of them cared. At precisely 6:45 a.m., Bryce Anders arrived. Mid-30s, expensive haircut, cufflinks polished like mirrors. He barely glanced at Walter as he strode past, tapping furiously on his phone. Walter nodded politely. Morning. Bryce didn't answer. The memo arrived at 9:02 a.m. A plain envelope slid across the janitor's office desk by a security guard who looked more nervous than usual. Walter opened it without ceremony. Termination effective immediately. No severance, no rehire eligibility, no handshake, no thank you. Just a signature from Bryce himself. A few minutes later, Bryce appeared in the doorway. Honestly, you should have left years ago. You're too slow for this place. We've got younger people who can handle the job faster. He smiled without warmth. It's nothing personal, it's business. Walter stared at the younger man for a long moment. No anger, no pleading. Just that quiet, unreadable gaze soldiers learn after seeing too much. I understand, Walter said simply. Bryce frowned, thrown off by the lack of protest. He expected outrage, begging. Instead, Walter rose slowly, gathered his few belongings into a worn canvas bag, and straightened his shoulders. As he stepped into the rain outside, Bryce called after him. You'll find something easier, maybe a desk job somewhere. Walter paused, looking back. The drizzle softened the deep lines in his weathered face. I'm sure I will. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small, folded document. The paper was old, creased, but the signature at the bottom, Walter Harris, owner, was still sharp and clear. They thought they fired the janitor, but they had just fired the man who owned the entire building. Walter didn't leave town, didn't even leave the block. That evening, he sat at the small diner across the street, nursing a black coffee as the city darkened outside the window. From his seat, he had a perfect view of the building. His building. The new management team thought he had nowhere to go, that he was just another disposable piece of their corporate puzzle. They couldn't have been more wrong. Through the diner's glass, Walter watched Bryce and his crew swagger through the lobby. Young, loud, obsessed with efficiency reports and client leads. They didn't notice how the older tenants still glanced toward the now empty janitor's office. Didn't see the way Mrs. Alvarez from Suite 402 hesitated before signing her lease renewal, eyes searching for Walter. Didn't hear Mr. Donnelly, a retired Marine from the 3rd floor, mutter under his breath. Bastards don't even know who built that place. The new managers had started revitalizing the building. Polished floors, new signage, a marble counter in the lobby. They raised rents, cut staff, canceled the veterans discount program Walter had insisted on years ago. It's not personal, Bryce kept telling tenants. It's business. But business had a short memory. They didn't know the 3rd floor, now law offices, had once been a barracks for veterans returning home, desperate for work and a place to stay. They didn't know Walter had been the one who bought the building to save it from demolition in the late 1980s, along with a group of fellow veterans. Most of them had passed away. Walter stayed, not because he needed to, because he promised them he would. Keep it standing, his old friend Sergeant Price had said. Make sure it always stands for us. So Walter stayed, first as a supervisor. Then, when the property trust changed hands and new firms took over, as the janitor. They won't fire you if they think you need the paycheck, Price had once joked. Let them underestimate you. That's how you hold the power. Now, Bryce and his investors thought they were the kings of the castle. Didn't bother checking the fine print of their own property deal. Didn't know the Veterans Property Trust had clauses, rights, and a failsafe written decades ago, and Walter still held the original deed. Slow, am I? Walter thought. We'll see how fast they run when this is over. He sipped his coffee, eyes calm. Rain streaked down the diner window, like the tracks of old tears. The clock was ticking. Bryce just didn't know it yet. Friday morning, 2 days since they'd thrown Walter out like trash. The building gleamed under artificial lights, polished, sterile, a cold beauty. Bryce paced the lobby, rehearsing his speech for the cocktail event that night. Investors, clients, media. The new era, he kept calling it. Progress, efficiency. But he couldn't stop thinking about the janitor. No, the former janitor, he corrected himself. Still, something about the way Walter had just walked away unsettled him. Too calm, too controlled. He should have begged, or at least yelled. Bryce, one of the junior managers, interrupted. The banners for tonight arrived. He followed her to the lobby, where 2 sleek black and gold signs read, "Welcome to the future of 215 West, a legacy reborn." Legacy. The word felt hollow. As the staff prepared for the evening, tenants passed by unnoticed. Mrs. Alvarez from Suite 402 frowned at the banners. Mr. Donnelly, the Marine, paused by the window, staring across the street at the diner where Walter still sat every morning. They noticed the change, the coldness, the absence. That night, the event began with champagne glasses clinking and shallow laughs echoing off marble floors. Bryce stood proudly, making his rounds. Then, someone cracked a joke. The old janitor? Bet he's working at some gas station now. A few chuckled. One of the investors added, or maybe sweeping the subway. They all laughed. Too loud, too long. Trying to outdo each other. Trying to show they belonged in this glossy, cutthroat world. Bryce smirked and lifted his glass. To new beginnings. No one noticed Mrs. Alvarez standing in the back, her face stone cold. Or Mr. Donnelly slipping out the door quietly. They definitely didn't notice the lawyer who entered moments later. An older man in a tailored suit with a briefcase marked Veterans Property Trust. He moved through the crowd unseen, heading toward the office where the building's real paperwork waited. Bryce thought the past was gone. He was wrong. By Monday morning, the cracks had begun to show. The power went out at 7:13 a.m. sharp. Elevators froze between floors. Security keycards stopped working. Bryce's phone blew up with messages. System outage. Clients stuck in the elevator. Heating offline. He stormed into the lobby, eyes wild. Get the maintenance team up here. Where the hell is the electrician? The security guard, a young man who had always looked nervous around Bryce, stood firm. You don't have authorization anymore. Bryce blinked. What? I said you don't have authorization to access the circuit rooms or the maintenance panels. I own this building, Bryce snapped. The guard didn't flinch. No, sir. You manage this building. There's a difference. Bryce pushed past him, stormed toward the maintenance door. It was locked. Before he could demand the master key, the hallway lights flickered on, but only in one direction. A slow, deliberate spotlight leading toward the lobby. Walter stood at the far end. No janitor's uniform. A crisp navy blazer. A silver pin gleaming on his lapel. An eagle clutching arrows, the mark of the Army Corps of Engineers. His shoulders were straight. His limp was barely noticeable. His presence filled the space like a silent command. What the hell is this? Bryce hissed. Walter walked forward slowly. I think it's called a reckoning. Behind him, the tenants gathered. Mrs. Alvarez, Mr. Donnelly, half the small businesses from the upper floors, even the coffee shop owner from the lobby. The community he'd served for 3 decades. The community he still protected. "I don't know what stunt you're trying to pull," Bryce said, voice trembling, "but this is trespassing. I'll have you arrested." Walter didn't even blink. Instead, he set a leather folder on the lobby counter. The original deed inside. Signed, sealed, stamped by the Veterans Property Trust. Bryce stared at the paper, his face drained of color. "No, that's impossible. We bought this building." Walter nodded calmly. "I know." He tapped the folder. "From a seller who never had the right to sell it." The crowd murmured. Phones came out. Cameras clicked. Bryce realized for the first time he was no longer in control. The lobby fell into stunned silence. Bryce snatched the deed from the counter, eyes darting across the faded document. Walter Harris, sole owner, Veterans Property Trust, purchase date, June 1987. "This has to be fake," Bryce muttered. "We ran title searches. We have contracts." But even as he spoke, doubt curdled his voice. The lawyer who had slipped into Friday's event now stepped forward. An older man with silver hair, calm as a judge. He handed Bryce another set of documents, notarized and authenticated. "Your firm purchased this property from a developer who never had clear title," the lawyer said evenly. "The sale was fraudulent. All claims of ownership beyond Mr. Harris are void." Bryce's lips parted, but no sound came. The lawyer continued, voice firm. "And since you used that false claim to raise rents, evict tenants, and fire protected staff, including a disabled veteran, you've also opened yourself up to civil penalties and criminal charges." Walter didn't move, didn't gloat, didn't even blink. He just let the silence say what he didn't need to. Justice doesn't shout, it waits, patient, inevitable. From the crowd, Mrs. Alvarez whispered to another tenant, "He's been protecting us this whole time." Mr. Donnelly crossed his arms and nodded grimly. "He owns this place, and he always has." Bryce's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He fumbled it out. A text from his corporate attorney. "Cease all operations. Pull out. You've lost." Bryce looked up, pale and breathless. You can't do this. You don't have the right to just..." Walter finally spoke. "I have the right, because while you were chasing profit, I was building something that lasts." He gestured to the people gathered around him. "A community, a home, and respect. Something you can't buy, no matter how many zeros are in your bank account." Bryce staggered back a step as the weight of 30 years of power, real power, closed in around him. For the first time since taking over the building, Bryce didn't have a comeback. No legal jargon. No smug confidence. Just fear. Walter turned to the tenants. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. Calm, commanding, every word weighed like stone. "I've let others run this place for years. Trusted they'd honor its purpose. Trusted they'd respect the people inside it." He paused. That trust was broken. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward, eyes shining. "You don't have to fight this alone." Then Mr. Donnelly, the Marine, raised his voice. "We've got your 6, sir." One by one, tenants nodded. The bakery owner, the retired school teacher, even the young couple who had moved in just last month. They all stood behind him now. Walter nodded once, an old soldier's nod. The kind that needed no words. A sudden commotion at the lobby doors. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by a stern-faced man holding a clipboard. The city building inspector. "Mr. Bryce Anders?" he asked crisply. "I'm placing a stop work order on all management activities in this property. We've received legal documentation confirming the rightful owner." He pointed toward Walter. "Mr. Harris." Bryce's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. This can't..." The inspector cut him off. "Your firm's lease is terminated. You and your staff have until the end of the day to vacate the premises." The guard who once followed Bryce's every order now crossed his arms, standing beside Walter. "We'll escort them out." Bryce's phone buzzed again. Another message from corporate. Abandon the property. Cut losses. He felt the eyes of the crowd burning into him. The same people he'd mocked, evicted, underestimated. Bryce's shoulders sagged. For the first time, he understood. The man he fired wasn't the janitor. He was the commander. By the end of the day, Bryce's name was already being scrubbed from the building's records. Security escorted him and his entire management team out under the cold, silent gaze of the tenants. No one heckled. No one jeered. They didn't have to. Public humiliation didn't always need loud crowds. Sometimes it was just the quiet weight of accountability pressing down like a mountain. Bryce's designer briefcase swung awkwardly at his side as he clutched a cardboard box, the same cheap boxes Walter had once used to haul cleaning supplies up and down the stairwells. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Local news crews gathered outside. Reporters shouted questions. Did you knowingly buy a stolen building? Why did you fire a disabled veteran? How will you compensate the displaced tenants? Bryce kept his head down. The investor calls had already dried up. His LinkedIn inbox, once full of offers, now swarmed with rejections and angry messages. The firm's remaining backers withdrew. Lawsuits flooded in from tenants, veterans organizations, even the city itself. His reputation, once polished like marble, cracked under the weight of his own arrogance. Bryce tried to salvage what he could. He called in favors, reached out to partners, begged his PR team for a strategy. Tell them I didn't know. Say I was misled. But no one cared. No one believed. And no one was willing to stand beside a man who had humiliated a decorated veteran and betrayed an entire community. As Bryce stood by the curb, waiting for a rideshare, a final insult arrived. The app glitched. No driver would pick him up. Mr. Donnelly watched from the building's entrance, arms folded. "Funny," he said quietly to Walter. "Seems like he's the slow one now." Walter didn't smile, just nodded. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. And balance had finally returned. But the final chapter, Walter's plan for the future, was still to come. By Wednesday, the new signs went up. Harris Veterans Center. Small, simple, carved in brass. No flashy fonts, no corporate slogans. Walter stood by the front doors, the morning sun gleaming off the metal plaque. Mrs. Alvarez held his arm proudly. Mr. Donnelly stood to his other side, wearing his old Marine cap for the first time in years. Reporters gathered again, but this time, not for scandal. For history. Walter addressed the crowd. "I could have sold this place a dozen times over. I could have cashed out and walked away." He looked at the tenants standing shoulder to shoulder behind him. But this building was never just bricks and steel. It was a promise. To my brothers and sisters in uniform, to their families, to the people who give more than they take. He unfolded a new mission statement. The Harris Veterans Center would restore affordable spaces for veterans and their families. Local businesses, the bakery, the coffee shop, the small law firm that helped veterans pro bono, would stay at reduced rents. Those who had been threatened with eviction, reinstated. Apologies made. Some offered roles in the new community board Walter had established. And the young couple who had moved in just before Bryce's takeover? Walter surprised them with an announcement. "Your rent's been paid for the next 6 months. Call it a welcome gift." The applause rippled through the crowd like a wave. Not the polite claps of business people, but the full, raw sound of a community standing tall again. Bryce, watching from across the street, anonymous now, hidden behind a newspaper, sank lower into his bench. His face pale, his phone silent. No cameras followed him anymore. No reporters called his name. But Walter's reckoning wasn't just about justice. It was about remembering why he fought in the first place. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Walter took the long walk up to the third floor. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint and old wood. Not the sterile scent of corporate polish, but something warmer, familiar. The old barracks room had been fully restored. Polished floors, simple furniture, and on the far wall, the original dedication plaque, rehung with care. To those who served and sacrificed, this is your home. Walter ran his fingers across the metal. So many names etched into memory. Men and women who had stood beside him in places the young execs could never imagine. Price, Daniels, Ortiz, Collins, gone now, but not forgotten. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. The young couple, Maya and Jordan, holding their toddler daughter. "Mr. Harris," Maya said gently, "we wanted to thank you again. Not just for the apartment, for all of this." Walter smiled, eyes softening. "This isn't mine. It never really was." He looked around the room. "It belongs to every veteran who thought they'd been forgotten, and to people like you who remind us why we keep building." Jordan nodded, voice quiet. "If you ever need help, we're here." Walter chuckled. "You'll be running this place long after I'm gone." Mrs. Alvarez and Mr. Donnelly arrived at the door, carrying a folded flag between them. The tenants voted, Mrs. Alvarez said, "and we want this flown at the front entrance, so no one forgets who kept this place standing." Walter took the flag gently. The weight of it felt heavier than any burden he'd carried before. He thought of the years, the loss, the battles, not just on foreign soil, but here, at home, where respect had to be fought for over and over again. They thought slow meant weak. They thought age meant useless. But everything they dismissed, that's what built this country. He nodded. And together, they walked down to the front lobby, past the new sign, past the gathering of families, toward the flagpole waiting in the evening breeze. The flag wasn't just for the building. It was for every veteran who had ever been underestimated, and who had, in the end, flipped the script. The crowd gathered outside as the final rays of sunlight stretched across the street. Tenants stood beside business owners. Veterans flanked families, old and young, rich and working class, bound by something Bryce and his kind never understood. Walter unfolded the flag carefully. The fabric rippled in the soft breeze, stars and stripes catching the fading light. His hands, rough, scarred, steady, clipped it to the line. Mr. Donnelly called out, "Ready!" Walter gave a nod. The flag rose, the pulley squeaking softly, not from disrepair, but age, history, memory. As the banner reached the top, the crowd saluted. Some with sharp military precision, some with hands over hearts, some just with silent, tear-filled eyes. A little boy whispered to his mother, "Is Mr. Harris really just the janitor?" Walter overheard. He turned, kneeling down slowly until he was eye level with the child. His voice was calm, warm, but edged with something firm, something unbreakable. "Son, I was never just anything." He stood tall again. The flag caught the evening breeze and unfurled fully, snapping smartly in the wind. It flew not just over the building, but over a promise kept, a battle won, a community reclaimed. And as the first stars appeared overhead, Walter Harris smiled. Not for the victory, but because he knew this time, no one would ever forget again.